All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Pain and Wellness Hour with Sonny Banks on WWDB-AM, sponsored by Tony Schuler and Pinnacle Medical Plus. I'm your co-host, Joe Dougherty, with Sonny Banks. We've got a fantastic show today, Sonny. Lots going on around the Delaware Valley, and a great legal guest that we're ecstatic to have back on the broadcast.
Agreed.
By popular demand.
Yes, Joe, we have our old friend Faye Riva Cohen with us today. As you know, we've had Faye on other broadcasts, and she provided our listeners with so much useful information that we decided to have her back. Her appearance today is very timely since we just celebrated MLK Day recently, and Faye's practice areas are in keeping with what Martin Luther King fought for. Faye Riva Cohen focuses on civil rights and discrimination cases, employment and labor law, family law, real estate, and estate planning and litigation. Faye Riva Cohen is the founder and managing partner of her own law firm, Faye Riva Cohen Attorneys at Law, or FCR, which is located at 2047 Locust Street in Philadelphia. She created one of the first woman-owned law firms in Philadelphia. Faye has been in practice for 40-plus years. Her promise to each of her clients is as follows: get to know you, understand your objectives, hear your concerns, work effectively and efficiently, keep you informed, strive to achieve your goals, and help protect your future. With Faye Riva Cohen, you get a no-nonsense lawyer who isn't afraid to roll up her sleeves and do battle with whatever person, insurance company, municipality, or big corporation threaten the health and safety of her clients. Faye, if you would, please remind our listeners about yourself and about your law firm.
Thank you, Sonny and Joe. It's a pleasure to be back on the program, and I love to talk about what the law can do for individuals out in the general public. And I'd like to spend a little time educating people, because I'm always astonished that people do not know, although there's a lot of publicity on social media and television, how the law sometimes works and what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. So in our firm, we concentrate on the big picture because we do practice in various areas of the law. Everything interacts with each other. So if someone comes in with an employment issue, there are quite often disability issues, there are workers' compensation issues, there's sometimes Social Security issues. There are unemployment issues, unemployment compensation. They may be losing their home. They may be behind and they may be facing foreclosure, or they need to work out an arrangement with the bank. They may have inherited a home and they don't know what to do with it because it's not in their name. Or they may unfortunately be going through a divorce or custody or problems that have been caused because of a situation in the workplace. So that's why I say we enjoy giving you information about the big picture.
So it sounds like you get most of your new clients or new referrals from old clients.
We do get a lot of referrals from previous clients. We also get a lot of referrals from the Philadelphia Bar Association Lawyer Referral Service, hundreds of them a year. And I belong to many referral networks. What has happened out in the private world of lay people and individuals is that they often join organizations where they're either given some kind of a referral to a lawyer through their workplace, and this could be large corporations, sometimes unions. Sometimes they've paid for membership in an organization that will give them something like a free will or attend a real estate settlement, but if litigation is required or something a little more intense. So I belong to probably 5 or 6 of those types of organizations that refer us many clients. And then, of course, the internet.
You know, it's interesting. We get the opportunity to do shows like this, and there's so many different facets to employment and labor, and obviously discrimination in the workplace. And I was going over some of our notes, and the one thing that's for damn sure, especially when you're dealing with civil rights and discrimination or an employment issue combined, it's an emotional time for somebody because often your identity is based on your work. And
Absolutely.
Even you mentioned marital problems and work, one way or the other, often has some sort of an impact, lack thereof, or overworking or conflicts in the workplace. What can somebody expect when they make that call to the office? Because sometimes making that first call can be the hardest part.
That's true. Well, I think the first call should be fairly early in the process. Many people have gone through an entire type of an appeal process with their employer, have not brought in an attorney, have not discussed where they should be going, what they should be seeing, that there are possibly deadlines they have to meet, or their expectations are very different than what the law provides. So I think pretty early into the process, and this can be done pretty cheaply. Some lawyers don't charge for a short consultation, some charge a small amount, some charge an hourly fee. It's worth getting some type of consultation at the beginning of your problem. And when I mean the beginning, I mean when you first think that there might be a problem coming up. So you've gotten some kind of a suspension notice, you've gotten some kind of a warning, you're in possibly a grievance process with a union, so they're representing you. It doesn't hurt to talk to an outside counsel. Unions and outside counsel quite often do different things, so you're not overlapping. You may, while you're waiting for a union to take action, miss a discrimination deadline. So pretty early into the process, or you receive a performance improvement plan, which is called a PIP. And I call PIPs kisses of death because not many people make it through PIPs. So it's good to have someone look at the PIP because quite often, especially if it's of a large company, have a PIP process. It's very well laid out, but the employer doesn't follow it. So that's a good way to get your foot in the door if you get a lawyer and you tell the employer you did not follow the PIP. They had 2 months to improve. That you were supposed to meet with them every week. You never met with them. They didn't improve, and you terminated them after 1 month. It's not a law, but it's something that will make an employer sit up and look as to what is happening or who is it. It could be a human resources person, it could be a supervisor who's trying to push this employee out the door without giving them their legal rights.
How many people do you actually get? And we always profess, obviously, getting a lawyer as early in the process as possible.
Right.
Unfortunately, in some of the areas of law that we talk about,
It's human nature to procrastinate.
Yeah, procrastinate or wait
Yes.
until you have no other options. Out of most of your clients, how often do you actually get somebody who protects themselves early enough to where they can maintain their rights?
We get a fair amount, but we also get a large amount of people who have tried to assist themselves, sometimes for years, and come to us at the end. For example, there's a young lady I just talked to before I arrived, and she has a disability claim. She worked for a large corporation. She had an injury. She asked for some kind of an accommodation, which under the law she can do. They never got back to her. It's a very large company. You'd recognize the name. They never got back to her with the accommodation request. She tried to find a lawyer initially. She hadn't called me, otherwise she probably would have had one. But she tried to find a lawyer, and they said, well, why don't you go through the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission or the EEO process yourself, and based on how you do, which normally you don't do very well through that process, then come to see us. Now she went through the process. She received a right to sue letter. Now the lawyers are saying you didn't come to us early enough in the process, and now you're in court, and she had then applied for Social Security disability, was awarded disability. I said, that can put a kibosh on your claim, because you're basically saying, as you know, Social Security is the highest form of disability, where you say there's no work in the economy I could do,
Right.
but my employer didn't accommodate me. While there's no work in the economy you can do. So I would say probably about 25% call at the beginning, and sometimes I'll tell them to wait a little bit, or what you can possibly do, or bolster your case, or keep a diary if nothing severe has happened. And many call at the end, and I see this a lot with real estate, where they've bought the house, they haven't brought an attorney into the process.
Wow.
And they find out the property line is,
They found out they have the other day $30,000-$50,000 in stucco damage right after they bought the house.
Oh, jeez.
They had a contractor review it. Who supplied the contractor? Their realtor, who's getting a kickback from the contractor,
Right.
possibly their realtor. And I see this all the time, and I said, it's pretty inexpensive to bring in a lawyer to look at an agreement of sale, make sure everything's finished, and it's not done.
cutting corners could actually
Right.
cost
Yeah,
you a
and you know
lot
what?
more.
What I see a lot in my own comp practice are clients who rely on their unions
Yes.
for help. I mean, and I see that the union's interest is not necessarily the client's interest.
I can tell you right now, especially on workers' compensation, and I have some insight on, labor and workers' comp, is that they don't. The unions. That's why we started a program, because they don't know. What they do know is they're getting a phone call after the individual's been out of work for, several months, being, waiting for the benefits, not really knowing. Finally, when they have nowhere else to go, they'll call their business manager or the union president up, who does what they normally do: call a good attorney.
Right.
That's why they have. But in the meantime, that individual, has no idea what what their rights and responsibilities are, and may have potentially signed different things. And and you also have, in a work comp situation, an employer and an insurance company, fighting back, and their protocols go in just to, to put the screws to somebody. They don't even know it.
Right. There are a lot of parties bumping heads.
Absolutely.
I would like to say about unions, I don't want to bash them, and I understand exactly what you're saying, because without unions, we wouldn't have a very good situation, because Pennsylvania is an employment at will state.
Right. Sure.
Most states are that way. But I think unions should reach out to private counsel, to some organizations. They can broaden their horizons. Quite often, you're not dealing with lawyers when you first deal with unions. So you're dealing with a shop steward or a rep who's a co-worker.
Or a business manager. I would think most of the business managers are not lawyers, correct?
Well, and that's true. Understanding that, and you're 100% right. It's really what we based our injured workers program on, in the fact that most union presidents and business managers. I do the labor show in the city,
Okay.
and most of the they're procuring work and benefits for their members, and working standards and fair wages.
Their focus.
Right. They're
Right.
not typically getting in the middle of workers' comp situations,
Right.
because they don't. There's a stigma there, but.
And as Faye said, they do a good job on the areas that they're focused on.
Oh yeah,
Right.
well that's
Right.
what they go out and deal with job grievances,
Right.
and a lot of different areas, and in some areas it overlaps. You get less discrimination in a union situation, because they just call their business manager, especially if you're talking about a building trades.
Right.
I mean, but at the same time, not all unions are the same.
No.
And so you have your private and your public unions, and at the same time, they don't specialize in employment law, and certainly
Or disability.
or disability.
And they don't know quite often that you can go out and get your own disability attorney. I can't just step on a case where there's a union, because the union has the
A
rights.
collective bargaining agreement.
Right.
Sometimes,
Yep.
But they don't always understand there are deadlines, and they miss these deadlines while they're waiting for grievances, while they're waiting for arbitrations. And I have a lot of very unhappy people that call and blame the union. And I said, well, the union, you don't have rights. Your union has a right. Now, the unions I've worked with, and there aren't that many through the years, that I feel have really been happy that there's a private lawyer.
Yeah, they're not happy about it.
No, and we've really accomplished some great things. But if I'm fighting the union and fighting the client, that's not fair. And I think,
and when it comes to unions, and I was born and was in a union, ironworkers union and I still have my card. I'm also in the News Guild union, but it's a different mindset in regards to a lot of those issues. Typically speaking, everybody's got their own collective bargaining agreement.
Right.
Workers' comp, for example, some unions have injured on duty.
Mm-hmm.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, City of Philadelphia.
Yeah, and sometimes they have positive benefits, and then they have negative parts of that, and the city has those types of programs, and so it's a different world, no question, and you got a point there. I mean, Faye, no question. It's almost like an insiders type situation. If you're on the inside, typically where they do really, when it comes to labor lawyers, that's their lifeline. So labor unions are very passionate about their labor lawyers, not as much their workers' comp. At the same time, a lot of labor lawyers have workers' comp attorneys in different programs.
Right.
So if you want to be involved in a union situation, a lot of times your best bet is to have a good relationship with a labor lawyer, because there's just trust issues a lot of times, and unnecessarily so. That's why we did what we did, because we saw there was such a gap.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about we talk your employment law and somebody there's so many different types of situations, but let's talk about somebody who's being harassed on the job. Okay, basic situation, but
Sexually harassed?
yeah, sexually
Okay.
harassed. So a woman or a man is being sexually harassed on the job.
And by the way, what is the gender split with those clients? More female than male, or
Definitely
Equal.
more female than male.
okay?
And so, having said that, somebody starts to give me some ideas, if you would, the different types of the definition of sexual harassment, and what it can range from.
Well, first of all, there is no law that says you cannot be harassed. There's no general law that says when you refer to a hostile work environment, that generally has some type of sexual or gender component to it. Just because your neighboring worker is harassing you is not covered under the law, generally. All right. So, but what I tell clients when they call is, look, your coworker may be making, sexual remarks or commenting on your figure, but your coworker has equal rights to you, at the beginning at least. You're both on an equal footing. So people will call and they'll say, I told my boss about this and my boss didn't fire him. So the law changed a few years ago, and what it really requires is that employers make some effort to try to resolve the harassment issue. They don't have to come in and terminate someone, especially if there's not a witness to an incident. Or sometimes there's a problem where coworkers have a out-of-work relationship and that goes south, and then they come in and they tell the boss, well, we want the fellow I had an affair with, I want him terminated.
Yeah.
He abused me, or there was some type of issue. So if the employer at least makes some type of effort to investigate, possibly change the placement of the workers, or give someone a different location, that's pretty much what's required of them, except there was a recent law a couple of years ago where the female didn't tell the employer because she felt the employer had some kind of a relationship with the harasser. But generally, the employer has to be given the information.
It's almost like giving notice,
Right.
Yes.
because how could they do something if they didn't actually know?
Yeah, and give them the
Right.
opportunity to
Right.
conduct an investigation.
In a
Right.
reasonable sense.
Right. So, and the investigation is often not to the liking of the person who complained about the harassment. And the issue is also, what type of harassment is it? Is it someone who's bothering someone on social media? Is there someone who's touching someone inappropriately? Is someone abusing someone so that someone needs a protection from abuse? So there's a lot of different types of harassment. It's not that what some people consider to be harassment, you and I may just say, look, he's just, annoying you. He's not physically touching you. He's not your supervisor. He's not someone who controls you in the workplace. He may be coming into your
got
area.
no power.
Right. And I think that makes a difference. So I'm seeing once in a while you'll have a huge award like the Roger Ailes issue, what went on at that station. But I'm seeing people who are, the employer is not jumping up and down the way they used to and say, oh, this person's harassing you. We're going to terminate him or we're going to keep you. Quite often they will find a way to terminate both parties. The employer is like, I don't want to be in the middle of this. I'm not going to monitor how this
I was thinking the same
relationship
thing. I
is
mean, from an
going.
employer standpoint, after I conducted a reasonable investigation and I felt that, the accuser's story had some truth to it,
Right.
I would fire the individual. I mean, why risk keeping that person on and,
Right.
have a lawsuit follow?
I don't emphasize sexual harassment in my practice because it's tough to have to go to court. You have to be a tough person. It's a difficult process. And what I've noticed in some of the sexual harassment cases involving the women is they're so emotionally, and I'm not saying this is not anyone's fault, but they're so emotionally distraught from the experience they went through or what they determine that they were. And when I look at the types of things, sometimes they say they were harassed by, I didn't particularly think it was someone other than just being an annoying
What would be the
person.
range? Like, for example, I've heard if somebody's got pornographic photos on a website and they leave it exposed and they leave their desktop open or something like that. That could be construed. So it doesn't necessarily have to be touchy-feely
No.
or language or flirting or
Well, we're in the hostile work environment. Like one of the first cases was a woman, I think she was a scientist in an all-male area, and someone would always be leaving pornographic drawings and photos around her area because she was the only woman. And it got to her, really affected her after a period of time. And that was the type of case. But then we're down to what is a hostile work environment and what is pornographic these days and what is funny and what is not. Someone who sends obscene jokes. Sometimes companies will keep obscene jokes going, and people are going to send it to each other. And then if you say something inappropriate to someone, they get upset, although they are on the stream of these obscene jokes. So I think it's a very, very difficult area, and the people who pursue those cases have to be very strong that they're going to be able to make it through a lawsuit. Quite often they drop out. They can't handle it.
The Me Too movement, has that impacted those types of situations?
I find that when movements come forth, there is a flurry of activity to a certain extent, and then they die off a little bit when another movement comes forward.
Let's talk about if it is your authority
Okay.
figure. In other words, it's somebody, it's a boss who's there's sexual innuendos or whatever, maybe
Right.
forcing the issue. Obviously, that's a different situation, but how different?
Bosses are often protected. Human relations or human resources individuals, they are paid by the company. They are paid by the company to keep that company in good shape, to keep the reputation of that company. There aren't that many, if they hear about a harassment issue. They may say they're investigating. I don't always see that happening. They may say there's going to be some kind of punishment or suspension. I don't see that happening. So a few years ago, I represented someone in California who was working with someone I had represented on the East Coast, and this woman was being really harassed by her boss, by other people in the workplace. And she not only reported the harassment, but her coworkers, who were men, reported the harassment. Well, who got terminated? She and the reporting person got terminated,
Wow.
and the coworkers.
Crazy.
Yeah, and I got them severance packages, but the company was not interested. They saw her boss as a high performer. They wanted to keep him, and I see that so often.
If somebody's getting, okay, but at the very least, if somebody's in that situation,
Well,
you got to give notice, and would you suggest obviously getting proof, evidence?
yes, keep a diary. Do not keep it on your computer, which belongs to the employer, because whatever's on the computer, the employer can have access to. Keep some kind of a diary at home, and report it and document your issues thoroughly. Make an appointment with HR if there is an HR person or people. And HR sometimes is located, 3,000 miles from the company. So, but at least make an effort to reach out to someone. And some people are afraid to do that. They're afraid of losing their jobs.
That's why I would go see an attorney immediately under those circumstances.
absolutely.
Because you need to navigate that
Right.
situation.
You need a game plan.
And having that type of uncomfortable situation. Now you're talking, how miserable somebody could be, and how impacted their life could be if you have to go 8 hours a day in that type of environment.
Very stressful.
No
Right.
question about it. Moving on and talking discrimination in the workplace, the different areas, race, religion,
Gender
sexual orientation,
and disability.
disability.
Okay.
Describe the differences, where people, in regards to, treatment. You have sexual harassment, which is somewhat obvious.
Right.
But now you have different, if you're in the workplace, it's a
Right.
racial situation. Talk about if there's a definition there. We'll talk about racial discrimination first.
All right.
And what is that definition, and what should somebody do, and what are their rights?
Well, sometimes people think that if you look at them wrong, you have discriminated against them because of their race, or because you don't understand the inherent bias that has occurred amongst that exists among the races, that you are suffering from race discrimination. It is very difficult to prove discrimination in general. Only about 10% of cases that ever go to court win in the discrimination area, because it's not blatant. You have not that many people that come up to you and say, I'm discriminating against you because of your race. And sometimes I will say to people, look, they hired you. You have worked here for 10 years. What happens now? What is going on now that is causing you to think there's racial discrimination?
Right, or it's a passive remark that wouldn't necessarily be a racist remark, like referring to somebody as boy.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody may really be offended by that, but the person saying it may not necessarily be a racist or be partaking in racial discrimination.
So I look at how have they suffered in the workplace. Have they applied for many jobs and only Caucasians? You're black and only Caucasians receive those jobs. And
Or for somebody's looking to get a higher position at,
Right.
at a firm or something.
Right. Have you not been promoted? Are you being kept in one position? Are they bringing in people of different races or genders and moving them above you, or you're being forced to train people who don't know your job and you do know your job. So I look for something that you can quantify in some instance, because the second part of law, people like to tell their stories. They will tell you this happened and this happened and this, and I go, yes, but what have you lost? What are your damages here? What are your damages? Well, it's against the law to discriminate. I said, but when you actually go to court, the judges and the courts want to know, how much have you lost? Because they don't put a large value, if any, on the fact that the civil rights laws have been violated. You have to get pretty much through the end of the case before someone says, we're going to add in these damages.
So having said that, we're gonna continue this discussion. We're gonna pay some bills, and we'll be back with more of the Pain and Wellness Hour with Sonny Banks and his guest Faye Riva Cohen after the break.
Pinnacle Medical Plus is a full-service urine toxicology and durable medical equipment company serving patients throughout the continental United States. With over 25 years of industry experience, the professionals at Pinnacle Medical Plus provide high-quality services and products combined with excellent service at a reasonable price. On the urine toxicology side, Pinnacle is a trusted partner that provides the most up-to-date therapeutic drug monitoring technology. On the DME side, Pinnacle offers an extensive list of premium products along with priority delivery services. At Pinnacle Medical Plus, their number one goal is making sure their customers and patients receive the quality care and services they deserve. Contact Pinnacle Medical Plus for all of your urine toxicology and durable medical equipment needs at 888-396-8644 or online at www.pinnaclemedicalplus.com. Suffering a work injury or any type of personal injury can be a painful and traumatic experience. What can make it even more difficult for a patient is trying to navigate and find the quality medical care they need for their particular injury. Healthmark Enterprises is a full-service medical coordination and marketing company started in 1994 by CEO Robin Lewison that takes all the worry and complications out of treatment for a work or personal injury. From coordinating full-service medical treatment with the top medical professionals, providers, and specialists to overseeing patient compliance and providing one-on-one personalized communications with clients. Healthmark Enterprises handles the entire treatment process for injured workers and those suffering personal injuries so they can just concentrate on getting better. Healthmark Enterprises believes that being injured should not limit one's access to great medical care. Now, more than ever, an injured person needs an advocate on their side. Contact Healthmark Enterprises at 215-563-1315. That's 215-563-1315. Healthmark Enterprises.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Pain and Wellness Hour with Sonny Banks, sponsored by Tony Schuler and Pinnacle Medical Plus on WWDB-860 AM. We have a fantastic show. We're talking civil rights. We're talking discrimination. Lots of workplace situations, and Faye Riva Cohen is our guest. And Faye, before we get into any cases, because we're going to talk about some cases that are examples of what we're talking about. What led you to this area of the law? I know I read on the website that when you first started out, you worked for somebody who was pretty pioneering in the industry. Tell us a little bit about that.
To add to that question, do you think being a woman gives you an advantage in this area of law?
I do think it gives me an advantage in this area of law. I think I am compassionate. I have empathy with my clients' problems. I don't look at it entirely in a business setting. I look at it in a setting like, how is this affecting their ego? How is it affecting their livelihood? How is it affecting their family life? And because you are what you do for the most part. And if you lose your job,
Sure.
and what's happening now with COVID, so many people are losing their jobs. you have lost your sense of self-esteem
Sure.
and everything that guides you.
Your identity.
Your identity.
Yeah, I mean, other than your family,
Basically.
that's really your biggest identity.
And I
your
think
work.
inherently, if you read my background, my parents were Holocaust survivors, and I came to America when I was 2. And my father was a member of a union, and it helped him out at that point. My parents had third-grade educations because they were taken away from their families and lost their entire families for the most part. And so I grew up in the Midwest, in Minnesota, which was a very conservative area, mainly Scandinavian. So I was considered an immigrant in that area. And I think just that I majored in social work, although I was never a practicing social worker. I just think something about that area and wanting to help people and wanting to enhance the law of civil rights. I mean, some of the first cases I was involved in was working alongside the EEOC, trying to bring minorities into unions. Not that much has changed, almost 50 years later. And when I see what's happening these days in society, someone yesterday sent me a vignette about the civil rights movement and people marching, and there were people of all races marching. And it was very inspiring and very upsetting because we've gone backwards to a certain extent in our society.
The social justice movement
Yes.
is at the forefront now.
Yes.
And obviously it was, in years past, but you're right. The
like
ball gets dropped.
History repeating itself.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is. So that's the reason I'm never bored. I like to hear people's backgrounds and stories. One thing about the law is the law is the law. It doesn't mean it's righteous. It doesn't mean it's just. It doesn't mean it's the most expeditious way to solve your problem. It's just, it's a system. It's a system. And although it exists, there isn't anyone coming down from Washington to save your job. So I think what's important is that people do what they can, try to get assistance where they can.
Did you, when you started out, did you know you wanted to help people in the workplace and people being discriminated against in civil rights issues?
I didn't really know. My highest grade in law school was securities law, and the professor offered me a job. So the stock market was where I did very well, and it was my first real job that got me into the area, and I stayed in the area, and it's been very fascinating. But if you meet with other civil rights lawyers, we have a way to go. It's a difficult area of the law.
As a woman, and so you're a soft-spoken woman, relaxed.
I'm not that soft-spoken.
No, but I'm saying
I am not that.
I know we're not. I know we're missing. But somebody mistake your kindness for your weakness, even when you're dealing with some of these. Because one of the things I loved about your website, David versus Goliath, right?
Yeah, I saw
Yes.
that.
To me, when I look at the picture here, it's our second broadcast we've done together. It's been a while, but opening up Pandora's box, like somebody, in the courtroom, and Sonny, we just did a show with Bernie Smalley talking about the lack of diversity in the law at times.
Yes.
Sure.
So you're dealing with, I'm sure you've walked into a courtroom here or there. You got 5 white, high-powered lawyers, and they're seeing the one woman representing the little person back there, and all of a sudden, they didn't really realize what was they were getting themselves into because they unleashed a lion. But
Right.
tell us about that.
Uh-oh.
Do you run into that, or have you ever run into it?
Oh, I've always, I've run into it. And you have to be very strong. You have to be very tough. And Philadelphia is a connected city, which took me a while to realize sometimes. I'd wonder, wait a minute, the judge should have ruled this way. And I'm like, oh, okay. I actually went back and looked to see who donated to that judge. you
Right.
know. I said, there's something going on here I'm not aware
Well,
of.
by the way, that's a whole nother.
Oh, I
I
know.
can get into that heavily.
I know. Yes, I mean, people have called me and they go, would you take on the University of Pennsylvania? Would you take on Temple? Would you take on Verizon? Would you take on City Hall? And I always say yes if I feel there's a...
And your answer is for breakfast. I'll do it for breakfast.
Well, look, I find if you're charming and kind, that is important. You have to build your reputation so that if people, you know people, and they go, oh, he's an SOB, I don't want to have anything to do with him. That's not going to help you in the long run. Regardless of whether that person thinks they're tough as nails, somewhere along the line, someone's going to say, oh, that is just a blowhard. There's one civil rights lawyer I hear whose name is mentioned, and he has dropped many cases in the middle of trials when he knows he's not winning. He drops the client, and I don't believe that. So, yeah, it doesn't, and also because I was raised in the Midwest and did not attend school here. So I don't have alliances, like I'm going to pursue Villanova, I'm going to pursue Temple, and probably every large company and corporation. The one thing about civil rights laws, it's expensive to bring a lawsuit. Someone has to pay, whether it's a client, whether it's not like workers' comp or some other areas where quite often there's an insurance bubble at the end.
Right.
There's somewhere you can go. Civil rights does not really work that way. Even if there's an insurance company, sometimes the coverage requires the employer to make the decision on settling. So I'm not aligned with any particular entity. I'll pursue anyone if I feel they have a case. But it's got to be a case with decent damages. It's got to be a case that I feel has some ability or some cause.
I was going to say, it's got to be comforting for your female clients, you being a woman, because a lot of these areas that you practice in are very sensitive.
Yes. Well, when women first started in the law, people didn't want to deal with women, and now I actually get calls. They want to only deal with women. So I have a male lawyer who handles family law, and they go, oh, I'm calling for a woman lawyer. I don't want to handle a man. I said, well, you're not supposed to discriminate, but I will monitor your case so you can feel free to deal with the man. So I sometimes feel sorry for men out there now because people are looking for women lawyers. But yes, but I'm not the feely touchy type that will say, oh, this is too bad. I try to get, and sometimes people don't appreciate it. They'll say, you're not letting me tell my story. And I said, well, I wouldn't make any money if I sat all day and listened to these stories. So I am asking you the questions you need to know, and you have to think hard. What do you want? Do you know how many people don't know what they want?
Sure. And having said that, before we get into an example of a discrimination case,
Right.
How many, just like Sonny, I'm sure all attorneys get into this, where somebody calls and they're vetting about a case, and it turns out not to be a case.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Happens a lot.
And that happens, and particularly in personal injury. But having said that, in your area of the law,
Right.
how many people come in out of the out of 10,
Right.
and tell you, they'll give you the facts, and it may or may not be a case.
I'd say there are many. There are many. They think there's a certain level of unfairness out there in general. In
How do you vet
society.
it, though? Like, because you'd be on the phone all day long.
Right. And I am on the phone
Yeah,
all day
right.
long.
Sure, maybe that's it.
Well, someone called me yesterday who had gone to a thrift shop, and she does not feel they look through her clothing, and she feels it was because she was black. And I said, look, I have gone to a thrift shop. They did not look at my clothing. Because
Faye,
they're really
here's what I heard. Thrift shop cases,
Yeah.
$10 million. Faye Riva Cohen can get it in 2 weeks. Like the Tom Cruise when doing A Few Good Men when they would tell me, because I can get that in 6 months. Is that the way it works or no?
Well,
Not quite.
no. I mean, in fact, I have to be careful because you have to walk a line. You have to be sympathetic, but you have to be practical.
Sure.
So if you say, I'm sorry that happened to you, I would write a letter to the thrift shop. That is not against the law.
This is not going to
It's
help
their
you,
own
and it's not going to help
business.
the potential client to pursue a claim that doesn't have any value.
No, but then I'm the one who gets yelled at. you don't understand the law, you don't appreciate the law, these laws are I check the internet, and the internet said I have a case. So a lot of that is fighting, I don't mean physically fighting, but arguing with your clients and telling them what you feel is a valid case.
Well, it's like what you said earlier, not every wrong is compensable.
Right.
If there isn't sufficient damages, then there really isn't a viable case.
Right.
Talk about a discrimination case, a racial discrimination case, that would be something that would be clear cut. An example of something that you may have.
All right. So we have a current case. A woman had gone to the grocery store in Bucks County. She's a black woman. She went to the store. Part of her job is to buy groceries. She manages like a group home. Okay. COVID had pretty much was a new situation, and she was standing 6 feet behind another woman in a cart. The cashier was a white woman. She said to my client, "You're standing too close to the next client." My client said, "Well, I'm 6 feet away." So the cashier took and pushed the shopping cart into my client's arm and hand, and my client had just had surgery on her hand.
Wow.
And then the cashier said the N-word to my client. And my client was so devastated that in this day and age, someone would say that. So she called over the manager of the store.
When it happens, it does catch you off guard.
That's incredible.
You don't expect it in this day and age.
So she called over the manager of the store, who didn't do anything. And
Wish we could shout this great store out, but let's let it go.
we're just starting because she was injured as part of her job.
Sure.
So there's a workers' comp component. There's going to be a personal injury component. We have filed a claim with a government agency about it. And so and this is the hard part, there's sometimes 3, 4, 5 different aspects of a simple case, which is fairly simple. She went to the store, and that was it.
Right.
I have another case that's pretty interesting. My client worked for a hospital. Remember when the riots occurred or the marches?
Sure.
This summer?
Mm-hmm.
She's under disability. She had gone home, and on her personal Facebook she wrote, "This is terrible with the riots." That's all she said, but the pictures she posted were all African Americans. 2 people at the workplace noticed this. They were African American or black. They complained about her to her boss. She was fired. She never said anything about anyone in particular, and they would not rehire her. So we've started an action based on that. There are many aspects to that. One is freedom of speech. How much freedom of speech do you have? And the second is she never made a racial remark to anyone, yet it was reverse discrimination. She was fired. So that's an interesting matter. So all our cases are always pretty interesting.
It seems to me in a lot of ways, that the law, knowing the law, it splits hairs. So in other words, you have to, what may seem common sense, like to me, if somebody's harassing a woman in the workplace, I mean, when I say just making innuendos or if you're, of a specific race, and you're they're not coming out and saying the N-word or something like that, but there's an issue in the treatment, and you're being disrespected or disregarded in some way, or that's as painful as that you can get, and it should be against the law, but not everything is quite that cut and dry. Am I correct?
Correct.
What if you take them outside and beat the living crap out of them?
Yeah.
Well, you know
It's
what?
called street justice.
I've never had anyone who's done that who hasn't been fired.
Yeah.
And so I caution anyone, even if the other guy starts it, and I hear this with union members all the time.
Well, it's funny you mention that. I got a story for you.
It's usually the guy who starts it. That's the person who gets fired first.
Wow.
but both good for it. I want to talk a little bit, if you have a chance,
Sure.
about age discrimination.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Because age discrimination is a big deal. Most of the cases that are being filed with government agencies involve age discrimination. But age discrimination is very tough to bring these days and win, because years ago, it was called the Gross case. The Supreme Court made it difficult to prevail on age discrimination. It used to be, it had to be one of the reasons of discrimination. Then it became the main reason. And that's another issue, but especially with COVID, tremendous amount of seniors are being terminated or won't have a job or can't keep up with the technology of working from home.
I mean, how do you prove that unless the boss comes out or the person, who
Very
you're
interesting.
accusing actually says, I'm firing you or I'm discriminating against you because of your age?
Well, and it's an interesting point, and I say that because if the individual's 77 years old and they're working, part-time,
Right.
and somebody comes in and you're in a room and, so it's a nursing home because they're very vulnerable. It's a
Right.
vulnerable population, but you're working there as an elderly person, and, somebody comes in and they genuinely say, listen, you're extremely high risk. Maybe fire, if it was me and I was the owner, I'd be like, listen, take some time off until this thing passes over, because you're in a vulnerable population. I just don't want to see anything happen to you.
Sure.
But you're talking about somebody getting fired for that purpose. Is that a valid? I mean, it doesn't sound valid to me. It sounds like
No, it
discrimination.
doesn't sound valid, but there are sometimes safety issues, okay? And if you actually go to court and a judge thinks it's a safety issue, let's say someone has a nursing background and is having a hard time keeping up or has a disability, they will give higher priority to the safety issue. So all the defendant has to say is, well, I know this person is 70, but, she can't do this work because it's causing a safety issue for the clients, which isn't true, but all they have to do is raise that, and that gets a lot of people eliminated.
So, Faye, having said that, we have a few minutes left in the broadcast. If you would, your contact information at the firm, if anybody wants your services.
So it's the law office of Faye Riva Cohen, and Riva's my middle name. There's not a hyphen in between. And I own a brownstone at 2047 Locust Street, which is near Rittenhouse Square. And when people ask, I say we own the whole building, so it's not a floor. We have parking available if necessary. There's always the phone. There's always Zoom. And please feel free to give us a call. Sometimes I give free consultations. Usually, if it's 10 or 15 minutes, it's free. If we have to research something or look at your particular facts, we will sometimes charge. It's not a large charge. We're pretty reasonable.
But you're telling them that ahead of time.
Yes. And I encourage anyone, if you have a question. In addition, and I was going to mention this to Sonny too, we have a large network, and Sonny is on our network, of lawyers that we know, who we refer cases to, and we know will do a good job. Because someone may come to see me, and I'll say, you know what, you have a workers' comp component. I'll refer it to Sonny. Or I'll say, you know what, you have a False Claims Act, which is a whistleblower. There's a lawyer I know who does that. You have a very high-value personal injury case. We'll give it to you. And I just wish that the Bar Association or lawyers in this area got together more and discussed, and I belong to employment lawyers organizations, and I learn, someone is writing every day, who does education law,
Sure.
which I do? Who does this?
Your network is vast.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing.
Yes. So for that reason, and just based on my years of experience, I feel very comfortable with a case. If I don't understand it or don't know about it, I will reach out to someone who does.
Outstanding.
Thank you.
Sonny Banks, if you would, your contact information.
Sure. Banks Law, 215-561-1000. Web address, www.bankslaw.com.
All right.
And I didn't give my phone number.
Oh, please do
address,
it.
So 215-563-7776 is the phone number. And my email is frc at FayeRivaCohen.com. So it's my initials at my full name.
And the website is Faye Riva Cohen.
www.FayeRivaCohen.
All right. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Pain and Wellness Hour with Sonny Banks. I want to thank Faye Riva Cohen for being our guest.
Same here.
Thank you.
Very interesting show. I know I enjoyed it.
Absolutely fantastic. Certainly going to help a lot of people. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. I want to thank Tony Shore of Pinnacle Medical Plus for being our sponsor and making it happen. And, of course, I want to thank WWDB-AM for Sonny Banks and Faye Riva Cohen. I'm Joe Dougherty. Thanks for listening.